The little girl was sitting on the floor of the hallway. Not crying, not asking for help, just sitting, knees pulled up to her chest, shoes too small, hair tangled like it hadn't been brushed in days. She was 5 years old, maybe 6, and she was completely alone. A courthouse security officer spotted her first. He knelt down slowly, the way you do when you don't want to scare something fragile. "Hey, sweetie, where's your mum?" The girl looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply said, in a voice so quiet it barely made a sound. She said, "Wait here." He looked left. He looked right. The hallway was full of people, lawyers with briefcases, mothers arguing on phones, a man in a rumpled suit texting fast. But not one of them was looking for a little girl. He picked her up. She didn't resist. She just held her stuffed rabbit tighter. That was 40 minutes before the most emotional courtroom moment Judge Judy had experienced in over 2 decades on the bench. And if you think you already know where this story goes, you don't. Because the real story isn't just about a child left alone in a hallway. It's about what happened when Judge Judy found out why. To understand why this case shook an entire courtroom full of lawyers and camera crew, you need to understand something first. Judge Judy Sheindlin has seen everything. In nearly 30 years of television, she has heard excuses that would make your jaw drop. She has watched grown men cry over parking disputes. She has caught people lying so badly they accidentally admitted to the very crime they were denying. She has stared down cheats, fraudsters, deadbeat parents, and entitled snobs without blinking once. She does not get emotional easily. Her producers will tell you that. Her bailiff, board will tell you that. The contestants on her show who walked in thinking they could charm her will tell you that, usually right after she cut them off mid-sentence and told them to sit down. So when Judge Judy walked into her courtroom that morning and the case file hit her desk, she opened it like she always did, quickly, efficiently, scanning for the facts. But this time, something made her stop. She looked up from the paper, then she looked back down. Then she called her producer over and said 4 words that her team had never heard her say before. "Clear the extra crew." That's how they knew this one was different. The case file. The case on the docket was listed simply as custody and welfare dispute, minor child, age 6. The plaintiff was a woman named Sandra Reyes, 34 years old. She was a social worker at a non-profit family support center. She had filed an emergency petition requesting temporary custody and protective oversight of a 6-year-old girl named Lily. Lily, as described in the file, had been brought to the social services office 3 weeks earlier by a neighbor who found her sitting outside an apartment building at 11 o'clock at night, alone, in the dark, in her pajamas. The neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Clara Farm, had knocked on Lily's apartment door for 20 minutes before calling for help. She had seen Lily outside before, twice in 1 week. The first time she assumed it was a mistake. The second time she brought her inside and fed her dinner. The third time she called Sandra Reyes. Sandra Reyes came to the apartment the next morning. The door was unlocked. Inside, she found dishes in the sink from what looked like several days ago, a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, a plastic bag of chips on the counter, and a note on the fridge written in red marker that said, "Lily, stay inside. Don't open the door. I'll be back." There was no date on the note. Lily's mother, a woman named Tanya Brooks, was the defendant in this case. She was 27 years old. She had a prior record that included 2 misdemeanor charges and 1 previous call to Child Protective Services 14 months ago that had been closed after an initial investigation. The case notes described the original CPS visit as inconclusive, mother present, child appeared healthy, no immediate danger found. That was 14 months ago. Now Sandra Reyes was standing in front of Judge Judy, asking for emergency protective custody, and Tanya Brooks was sitting across from her, arms crossed, jaw tight, with a public defender beside her, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Sandra Reyes entered first. She was the kind of woman who made you feel calm just by being in the room. Medium height, practical clothes, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She carried a thick manila folder and a smaller notebook that she'd clearly filled with her own handwriting over the past few weeks. She walked to the plaintiff's table with quiet confidence, not arrogance, just the steady composure of someone who had done this before and knew exactly why she was here. She glanced over her shoulder once as she sat down, back toward the door, like she was checking for something. Judge Judy noticed. Then Tanya Brooks came in. She was young, genuinely young in a way that caught people off guard. She was dressed in clothes that were clean but worn, her hair pulled back, her face tight with the specific look of someone who was very scared but refusing to show it. She sat down fast, leaned slightly toward her public defender, and whispered something. He nodded once without looking at her. She looked at the camera, then at Judge Judy, then at her own hands. She didn't look at Sandra Reyes. Judge Judy studied her for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked down at the file again. "Before we begin," she said, her voice calm and even, "I want to understand one thing. There's a note in this file about a child being found in the hallway of this courthouse this morning." She paused. "Is that child connected to this case?" Sandra Reyes closed her eyes briefly. Tanya Brooks didn't move. "Yes, Your Honor," Sandra said. Judge Judy set down her pen. "Tell me everything." The story Sandra told. Sandra Reyes had been a social worker for 11 years. She explained this not to impress anyone, but because she wanted the court to understand that she did not panic easily. She had worked in neighborhoods where children grew up too fast. She had knocked on doors that nobody answered, and windows that told you everything. She had written reports that kept families together, and when necessary, reports that did the opposite. She knew the weight of both. She had first learned about Lily 3 weeks ago from Mrs. Clara Pham, the neighbor. She described Mrs. Pham the way you describe someone worth trusting, a 71-year-old retired school teacher who had lived in the same apartment building for 19 years, who knew every tenant by name, who kept a spare key for the elderly man on the 3rd floor and watered the plants in the lobby every Sunday. Mrs. Pham was not a nosy neighbor. She was a careful one. And when she called Sandra, she did not exaggerate. "She told me she had seen Lily outside at night 3 separate times in 8 days, Sandra said. The first time she asked Lily where her mother was. Lily said Mama went to get something and would be right back. Mrs. Pham walked her inside, waited an hour, then left Lily inside her own apartment because the mother had returned by then. The second time, Mrs. Pham again brought Lily inside. At 9:30 in the evening, fed her and waited. This time the mother came back around midnight. When Mrs. Pham tried to speak with her, the mother got upset and said it was none of her business and that her daughter was fine. Sandra looked down at her notes, then back up. The third time was the night she called me. Lily was outside at 11 p.m. in her pajamas. Mrs. Pham brought her inside again. And this time Lily told her something. The courtroom was very quiet. She said, "Mrs. Pham, I'm hungry. I ate all the chips." There was no dramatic music, no camera zoom, just those 7 words, spoken plainly into a silent room. Sandra continued, "When I visited the apartment the next morning, I found the conditions I've described in my report. Minimal food, no adult supervision, a note on the refrigerator that gave no date and no contact number. Lily was asleep on the mattress when I arrived. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on the night before. When she woke up, she was very calm, which I want the court to understand is not always a good sign in children who have learned not to expect help." Judge Judy had not moved. Her expression was the same one she wore when she was reading a contract she already knew was fraudulent. Still, focused, giving nothing away. "Where was the mother?" she asked. "She returned approximately 2 hours after I arrived," Sandra said. "She had been at a friend's house. She was not under the influence of any substances when she returned. She was not hostile. She was actually," Sandra paused, choosing her word carefully. "She was ashamed." "And what did she say?" "She said she made a mistake. She said it wouldn't happen again." She started to cry. Tanya Brooks across the room said nothing, but her jaw moved slightly, like she was holding something in. "And then?" Judge Judy asked. "And then she said, 'Please don't take my daughter. She's all I have.'" Before the defense spoke a single word, Judge Judy did something she rarely did. She turned away from the papers. She looked at Tanya Brooks directly and said, not unkindly but with complete seriousness, "Miss Brooks, I'm going to hear from your attorney in a moment. But first I want to hear from you. Tell me about your daughter." Tanya's public defender started to speak. Judge Judy raised one finger. "Not you, her." A long pause. Tanya Brooks looked at her hands. Then she looked up. "She's 6, she said. Her voice was low and flat at first. The voice of someone who has trained themselves to speak without feeling, because feeling costs too much. "She'll be 7 in March. She likes rabbits. She has this stuffed one she carries everywhere. She calls him Benny." Another pause. "She's really smart. Like, she asks questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly south? Why do some people have more food than other people? Tanya's voice changed slightly on that last one. Rougher. I don't always have the answers. Judge Judy waited. I work 2 jobs, Tanya continued. I clean offices at night, midnight to 6, and I work at a laundry on weekends. During the week, Lily goes to school and then to aftercare. But the aftercare ends at 6, and I don't start work until midnight, so there's a gap. Usually I manage it. Usually I'm there. But 3 weeks ago, my babysitter, the woman who covers that gap for me, she had a family emergency and left without telling me. I was already at work. I couldn't leave without losing the job. I called everyone I knew. No one answered. She stopped. So you left her alone, Judge Judy said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation either. It was just a fact, asked plainly. I left her with instructions. I left food. I told her to stay inside. She was 5 years old. 6 years old, Judge Judy said quietly. Alone in an apartment. At night. Tanya's eyes filled. She didn't blink them away. She just let them fill up, like she didn't have the energy to fight that too. I know, she said. I know what I did. I knew it was wrong when I was doing it, but I didn't have a choice that I could see. The room was still. Judge Judy looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, continue. The public defender spoke next. His name was David Huang, and whatever exhaustion he normally carried into public defender cases, he set it aside for this one. He had reviewed the file, he had spoken to Tanya, and whatever he privately believed about the situation, he had come prepared to tell a more complete story. He asked Judge Judy permission to submit 3 documents. She granted it. The first was Tanya Brooks's employment record, not a summary, but the actual timesheets from both jobs going back 14 months. Every week, every shift, every hour logged. Judge Judy looked at it. She worked an average of 61 hours a week, David said, for 14 months. The second document was Lily's school record. Perfect attendance, no behavioral issues. Teacher comments that described a child who was curious, friendly, and performing at or above grade level. The third document was a letter. It was handwritten, on plain white paper, in careful looping cursive, the kind of handwriting you learn at a church program or a community center, rather than a formal class. It was a letter from Mrs. Clara Pham. David read a portion of it aloud. I am not here to excuse what happened. What happened was wrong and it frightened me. But I have watched Tanya Brooks since she moved into this building 22 months ago, and I want whoever reads this to know one thing, that woman loves her daughter. I have seen it 100 times. I have seen her come home from a night shift at 6 in the morning, exhausted beyond words, and still sit down on the floor of the hallway to hear about Lily's day at school before they even went inside. I have seen her skip meals so Lily could have more. I have seen her make something out of nothing, week after week, in a way that most people in comfortable lives will never understand. What she did 3 weeks ago was a desperate mistake made by a desperate woman with no safety net and no one to call. I am 71 years old. I have raised 4 children. I know the difference between a mother who doesn't care and a mother who is drowning. Tanya Brooks is drowning. Please don't punish her child for that. David Huang set the letter down. The room was quiet again, but differently this time. The earlier quiet had been the stillness of shock. This quiet was heavier, the kind that settles over a room when a truth has just been spoken that nobody can argue with. Judge Judy speaks. Judge Judy had been writing notes throughout all of it. She wrote when Sandra spoke. She wrote when Tanya spoke. She wrote during David's presentation. She wrote slowly and deliberately, the way someone writes when they are not just recording facts but working something out in their own mind. When David finished, she set down her pen. She did not speak immediately. She looked at the letter from Mrs. Pham. Then she looked at Tanya Brooks. Then she said something nobody expected. Miss Brooks, how old were you when you had Lily? Tanya blinked. 21. And Lily's father? A pause. He left when she was 8 months old. I haven't heard from him in 5 years. Do you have family? Parents? Siblings? My mother passed away when I was 19. I have one brother. He lives in Texas. We're not close. Friends? People you can call? Tanya gave a small, tired laugh. The kind that isn't funny at all. I used to. When you work 60 hours a week and you're raising a kid alone, most of those people, they stop calling, and you stop having time to call them back. Judge Judy nodded slowly. Not with sympathy exactly. She was not in the business of sympathy, and everyone in the room knew it, but with something else. Recognition, maybe. the look of someone who has been on this earth long enough to understand that situations this painful rarely come from one single bad decision. She picked up her pen again. "Miss Reyes," she said, "what is your recommended outcome?" Sandra Reyes straightened slightly. This was the question she had been prepared for. "Your Honor, I am not recommending permanent removal. Based on my investigation, the consistent evidence of Lily's well-being, her school performance, and Mrs. Phamb's testimony, I believe this family can remain intact with structured support. My recommendation is a formal safety plan, mandatory check-ins, connection to subsidized childcare resources, and a crisis contact protocol so that Miss Brooks is never again in a situation where she has no one to call. And if she violates the safety plan, then we revisit custody at that point." Judge Judy turned back to Tanya. "Do you understand what she just said?" "Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand that the next time this happens, and I mean the next time your daughter is alone and unsupervised, and in any situation that could cause her harm, the outcome will be very different from today?" "Yes." "Do you believe there will be a next time?" The longest pause of the entire hearing. "No," Tanya said, and then more quietly, "But I thought that before and I was wrong, so I don't know how to make you believe me." Judge Judy looked at her. "That," she said, and for just a second her voice carried something softer underneath the steel, "is the most honest thing anyone has said in this courtroom in a long time." While the hearing was underway, Lily Brooks was in a small room down the hall. It was the kind of room courthouses keep for children. A few plastic chairs, some crayons, a box of board books that had seen better days. A court-appointed child advocate named Miss Torres was sitting with her. Lily had been given a juice box and a pack of crackers. She was drawing. Miss Torres told the court later that Lily had drawn, without being asked, a picture of a house with a sun above it, and two people standing in front, one tall, one small. Underneath, in careful 6-year-old printing, she had written a word. The word was home. Miss Torres had asked her about the drawing. "That's me and my mum," Lily said. "Is that your house?" "It's the house I want," Lily said simply. "Ours doesn't look like that yet, but my mum says we're working on it." When this was relayed to the courtroom, Sandra Reyes looked at the ceiling for a moment. David Huang clicked and unclicked his pen 3 times. One of the camera operators set down their equipment briefly. Judge Judy did not look at the ceiling. She looked straight ahead, but her next words came out slightly slower than usual, more careful, like she was choosing every single one. "A child who has been left alone," she said, "does not draw a picture called home with her mother in it, unless that child, on some deep level, still feels safe with that mother. Children do not lie in their drawings. They are not yet old enough to perform feelings they don't have. That picture tells me something that no report, no timesheet, and no court document can fully capture." She paused. "It tells me that Lily Brooks knows she is loved." Judge Judy delivered her ruling with the same directness she brought to everything. No theater, no dramatics, just clear words in a clear order. She approved Sandra Reyes's recommended safety plan in full. Tanya Brooks was to be connected immediately with the city's subsidized childcare program, which would cover evening hours on the 3 nights per week she worked the late shift. The cost was income scaled, meaning Tanya would pay what she could actually afford, which, based on her documented income, was very little. She was required to check in with Sandra Reyes every 2 weeks for 6 months. The check-ins were not punitive, they were practical, a chance to problem solve before problems became crises. She was required to attend a single-session family support workshop offered by the same non-profit Sandra worked for. Not a punishment, not a class on how to be a better mother. A workshop that would connect her to the network of resources, emergency childcare, crisis funds, food assistance that she had clearly never known existed. And finally, Judge Judy made one ruling that was not on Sandra's list. "Mrs. Clara Pham," she said, "is to be formally recognized in this record as a protective presence in Lily Brooks's life. It is my recommendation, and I do not often make recommendations, I make rulings, but it is my recommendation that Miss Brooks maintain and nurture that relationship, because Mrs. Pham is exactly the kind of neighbor that saves lives, and Lily was lucky to have her." She signed the document. "Court is adjourned." She stood. The room began to move again. Chairs scraping, papers shuffling, the low hum of people returning to the ordinary rhythm of a day. Sandra gathered her folder. David Huang shook Tanya's hand briefly. Tanya sat still for a moment. Then she stood up straight, picked up her bag, and walked out of the courtroom. Down the hallway, around the corner, and into the small room where Lily was still drawing. Lily looked up. "Mama." Tanya crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt down on the floor and held her daughter like someone who had just realized exactly what they almost lost. Nobody in the doorway said a word. Moments like this one do not stay in courtrooms. They travel through the people who were present, through the camera footage, through the quiet conversations people have at dinner tables when someone asks, "Did you hear about that case?" What Judge Judy said in the hallway after this hearing was not filmed. It was not broadcast. It was recorded only in the memory of her producer, who walked with her back to her chambers and later described it in an interview. She said, "That woman is not a bad mother. She is a poor mother. And we have decided as a society that those 2 things are the same. They are not. A bad mother does not care. A poor mother cannot manage. And we have built a system that punishes both of them equally without asking which one we are actually looking at." She stopped at her door. "Lily's going to be okay. Not because the system worked. The system barely worked. She's going to be okay because an old woman named Clara Pham paid attention. She went inside. The producer stood in the hallway for a moment, then wrote it down. Here is the truth that this case forces us to look at. Not comfortably, but clearly. Every year in the United States, nearly 500,000 children are involved in the foster care system. The majority of them are there not because their parents are violent or dangerous, but because their parents are poor, because they work too many hours and earn too little money, because they have no childcare and no safety net and no Mrs. for mom next door. The system is designed, at least in theory, to protect children, and sometimes it does. But it also, frequently, separates children from parents who love them, because those parents made desperate decisions while standing at the edge of an impossible situation with no good options. Tanya Brooks did something wrong. That is not up for debate. Lily was alone, and she should not have been alone. But Tanya Brooks also worked 61 hours a week for 14 months. She made sure her daughter went to school every single day. She made sure Lily had a stuffed rabbit named Benny, and knew that she was loved and had a picture in her head of the house they were working toward. The question this case asks us, the question Judge Judy was asking, underneath all the rulings and the paperwork, is this. When we look at a child sitting alone in a hallway, who are we actually seeing? Are we seeing a child in danger? Yes. Always in that moment, yes. But are we also seeing the end result of a system that tells single mothers to work multiple jobs, provides them with almost no support, prices childcare out of reach for millions of families, and then asks why their children are sometimes unsupervised? The honest answer is both. The easy response is to blame the mother. The harder response, the one that actually changes things, is to ask why she had no one to call. Lily. 3 months later, Miss Torres, the child advocate, checked in on Lily 3 months after the hearing as part of her routine follow-up process. She found her exactly where you would hope to find a 6-year-old child on a Saturday morning, at the kitchen table, eating cereal, drawing another picture. Tanya was on the phone in the other room, speaking to Sandra Reyes, as it happened, for one of their regular check-ins. Her voice through the wall was calm, organized. She was asking about a childcare subsidy renewal form she needed to submit by the end of the month. Mrs. Pham was there too, drinking tea in the small kitchen, watching Lily draw with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows they did the right thing. The apartment was the same apartment, still small, still modest, still with the mattress and the single lamp, but there was more food in the fridge. There was a new aftercare schedule taped to the refrigerator door, color-coded in blue and red marker, and there was a list of emergency contacts, 4 names and 4 numbers taped right below it. The first name on the list was Clara Pham. Lily looked up when Miss Torres walked in. "Do you want to see my new drawing?" she asked. Miss Torres sat down across from her. The drawing showed the same house as before, but bigger now, with a garden, with a dog in the yard, with 3 people standing out front instead of 2. "Who's the third person?" Miss Torres asked. Lily pointed to the figure on the left, a small old woman with round glasses, drawn in careful crayon strokes. "That's Mrs. Pham," she said. "She lives with us now, in my drawing." She paused, then added very seriously, "Not in real life, but in my heart." Miss Torres wrote it down. Some things deserve to be on the record. This is a story about a judge, but it is not really a judge's story. It is a story about a little girl and a stuffed rabbit named Benny, and a word written in crayon, home. It is a story about a woman named Clara Pham, who noticed and kept noticing and eventually picked up the phone, not because she was required to, but because she understood, in the way that certain people simply do, that the person next door is your responsibility. It is a story about a young mother who worked 61 hours a week and still fell short, and who sat in a courtroom and told the truth when the truth was the hardest possible thing to say. And yes, it is a story about Judge Judy, who looked at a complicated, painful, messy human situation and did not reach for the simplest verdict available, who asked the harder question, who recognized that a child drawing the word home with her mother in the picture is telling you something worth listening to. Justice, on its best days, does not just punish, it does not just protect. On its best days, it sees the 61 hours. It sees the crackers and the juice box. It sees the woman who has been drowning quietly for years with a smile on her face for her daughter's benefit. It sees the neighbor with the round glasses who showed up 3 times when she didn't have to. It sees Lily, small and calm in a courthouse hallway, holding her rabbit, waiting for her mother, because her mother told her to wait, and she still believed her mother would come back. And it asks, with more courage than we usually give courts credit for, what kind of world makes a child learn to wait like that? And what would it cost us really to make sure she never had to wait alone again? If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, then share it, not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, because somewhere right now there is a woman working 61 hours a week with nobody to call, and there is a child counting chips in a bag, and the only thing standing between that child and a much darker story is a neighbor who notices. Be the neighbor who notices.